The gunshot echoed through the stillness of the dawn, shattering Naomi Winters' last shred of peace as she watched her father's body crumple to the ground, his blood staining the dry Kansas dirt. In that moment, everything changed, not just the loss of her only family, but the beginning of a nightmare that would see her name dragged through the mud of Great Bend by women who couldn't stand the threat of her independence. Papa. Naomi cried, rushing forward as the gunman fled into the early morning shadows. At 22, she'd never imagined being alone in the world, especially not in such a violent manner. She gathered her father's head into her lap, the warmth still present but fading quickly. Sheriff Mills arrived moments later, drawn by the sound of the shot. He removed his hat when he saw Old Man Winters lying there, his life already gone from his eyes. "Miss Naomi, I'm mighty sorry," he said, his weathered face grave beneath his silver-streaked mustache. "Did you see who did this?" Naomi shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Just a shadow. He ran that way," she pointed toward the east end of town. "He wore a bandana over his face." "I'll organize a search party," Sheriff Mills promised, "but for now let's get your father taken care of." Within hours, the entire town of Great Bend, Kansas knew of Edward Winters' murder. By sunset, Naomi found herself alone in the modest house she had shared with her father, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold. The April evening brought a chill through the poorly insulated walls, but she couldn't muster the energy to build a fire. A knock at the door roused her from her stupor. She opened it to find Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, standing on her porch with a covered dish. "I brought you something to eat, dear," the woman said with a sympathetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you." "Thank you," Naomi mumbled, accepting the dish. Mrs. Henderson didn't leave right away. Instead, she looked past Naomi into the house. "I suppose you'll be selling the livery stable now. A young woman alone can hardly manage such a business." Naomi stiffened. Her father's livery stable was the largest in Great Bend, servicing the cattle drives that passed through and providing a good living for them both. "I've been helping Papa run it since I was 14. I know the business." Mrs. Henderson's smile turned brittle. "Of course, dear, but it's hardly proper. Besides, my husband mentioned your father had outstanding loans at the bank." "We don't have any loans," Naomi said firmly. "Papa owned the stable outright." Something flickered in Mrs. Henderson's eyes before she patted Naomi's arm condescendingly. "Well, I'm sure it will all get sorted out. Get some rest, dear." After she left, Naomi locked the door and leaned against it, a cold feeling of dread settling in her stomach. Her father had always handled the books, but she was certain they weren't in debt. She would need to check the records first thing in the morning. The following day, Naomi dressed in her most practical clothing, a simple dark skirt and blouse, and made her way to the livery stable. Eyes followed her progress down Main Street, and whispers trailed in her wake. Great Bend wasn't a large town, just a few thousand souls, but it had grown substantially since the railroad had come through. Still, it was small enough that everyone knew everyone's business, and news traveled faster than telegraph wire. When she arrived at the stable, she found Tom, her father's longtime assistant, already at work. "Miss Naomi," he greeted her, removing his hat. "I'm awful sorry about your pa. He was a good man." "Thank you, Tom," she said, genuinely grateful for his simple kindness. "I'll be taking over the business now." Tom's weathered face registered surprise. "Begging your pardon, miss, but are you sure that's wise? Running a stable ain't exactly ladies' work." Naomi squared her shoulders. "It's my stable now, Tom. I grew up in it. I know how to keep the books and tend the horses as well as any man." Tom looked uncomfortable but nodded. "If that's what you want, I'll help any way I can." "I appreciate that." She hesitated. "Tom, did my father ever mention taking out loans from the bank?" Tom scratched his head. "Not that I recall. Your pa was proud of owning this place free and clear." Relief flooded through her. "That's what I thought. Mrs. Henderson suggested otherwise yesterday." "Mrs. Henderson," Tom snorted. "Begging your pardon again, but that woman's got a nose longer than a bloodhound's for other folks' business." Naomi managed a small smile before heading to her father's office, her office now at the back of the stable. She spent the morning going through the ledgers, confirming what she already knew: the stable was profitable and free of debt. The relief was temporary, however, as her mind kept returning to her father's murder. Who would want Edward Winters dead? He had been well liked in Great Bend, a fair businessman who'd arrived 15 years earlier with a young daughter and a determination to build a good life. They had weathered droughts, harsh winters, and the volatility of a frontier town together. Now she was alone, with more questions than answers. Around noon, Sheriff Mills stopped by. "Any leads?" Naomi asked immediately. The sheriff shook his head. "Trail went cold at the edge of town, but I wanted to let you know I'm still looking." He hesitated. "Miss Naomi, I should tell you there's been some talk." "What kind of talk?" "Some folks are suggesting your father might have had dealings with unsavory characters, that maybe his murder wasn't random." Naomi felt her face flush with anger. "That's ridiculous. My father was an honest businessman." "I know that," Sheriff Mills assured her. "But you should be prepared for the gossip. Small towns feed on it." After the sheriff left, Naomi tried to focus on work, but her mind kept returning to his warning. Who would spread such lies about her father? That evening, she decided to visit her father's grave. The cemetery was on a small hill overlooking Great Bend, peaceful in the golden light of sunset. She placed a small bouquet of wildflowers on the fresh mound of earth and sat down beside it. "I miss you, Papa," she whispered. "I don't know what to do now." "Talking to the dead won't bring them back." Naomi startled at the deep voice behind her. She turned to see a man she'd never met before, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing trailed, dusty clothes and a worn leather vest. His dark hat was pulled low over his eyes, but she could see he was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. "I wasn't expecting them to answer," she replied, wiping away tears and standing up. "Who are you?" "Name's Noah Marshall," he said, removing his hat. His hair was dark and a bit too long, and his eyes were a startling blue against his sun-bronzed skin. "I'm sorry for intruding on your grief. Are you new in town?" Naomi asked, noticing the trail dust on his clothes and the weariness in his stance. "Just rode in," he confirmed. "Looking for work?" "What kind of work?" "I'm good with horses. Worked as a horse trainer for a few ranches up north." An idea formed in Naomi's mind. "I might have something for you. I own the livery stable in town. I could use someone with experience, especially now." Noah Marshall studied her for a long moment. "You own the stable?" "Yes," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "My father was Edward Winters. He was murdered 2 days ago." She gestured to the grave. Noah's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Winters, Naomi Winters." He nodded. "If you're serious about the job, I'd be obliged, Miss Winters. I need the work." "Come by tomorrow morning," she said. "We can discuss terms." As they walked back toward town together in the fading light, Naomi was acutely aware of the tall stranger beside her. There was something about Noah Marshall that intrigued her: a quietness that suggested depth, and eyes that seemed to see more than they revealed. "Where are you staying?" she asked as they reached the edge of town. "Haven't found a place yet. Thought I'd check the boarding house." "Mrs. Prescott runs a decent place," Naomi said, pointing toward a 2-story building a few blocks away. "Tell her I sent you." Noah tipped his hat. "Much obliged, Miss Winters. I'll see you tomorrow." As he walked away, Naomi felt a curious lightness in her chest despite her grief. Perhaps it was simply the prospect of extra help at the stable, or maybe it was something about the quiet confidence of Noah Marshall. Either way, she headed home with the first sense of hope she'd felt since her father's death. The following morning, Naomi arrived at the stable early, wanting to make sure everything was in order before Noah arrived. She had just finished feeding the horses when she heard raised voices outside. She stepped into the yard to find Victoria Clark and Beatrice Henderson, Mrs. Henderson's daughter, speaking to Tom in hushed but clearly agitated tones. "Good morning," Naomi said, approaching them. "Is there something I can help you with?" Victoria and Beatrice exchanged looks before Victoria spoke. "We were just asking Tom about boarding our horses here, but he said we'd have to speak with you." Her tone suggested this was an inconvenience. That's right, Naomi confirmed. I own the stable now. Beatrice gave a small, condescending laugh. Naomi, be reasonable. A livery stable is no place for a woman to be running about in trousers, getting dirty and dealing with rough men all day. Naomi glanced down at her practical riding skirt and boots. I'm hardly in trousers, Beatrice, and I've been working with my father here since I was a girl. That was different, Victoria cut in. You had your father's protection then, now you're alone and people are talking. Talking about what? Naomi demanded, though she had a sinking feeling she knew exactly what they meant. Beatrice leaned in, lowering her voice. About how your father really died, about the kind of men he was involved with, the gambling debts. My father didn't gamble, Naomi said through gritted teeth, and he certainly didn't have debts. That's not what my father says, Beatrice replied, referring to Mr. Henderson, the banker. He says your father was in over his head, that's why he was killed. Your father is lying, Naomi said flatly. I've gone through all the books, we don't owe the bank a cent. Victoria placed a hand on Naomi's arm in what appeared to be a gesture of concern. Naomi, we're only trying to help. You should consider selling the stable before more unpleasant rumors spread. Naomi shook off her hand. I'm not selling, and you can tell anyone who's interested in spreading rumors that they'd better have proof before they slander my father's name or mine. The two women exchanged another look, this one filled with something that looked suspiciously like satisfaction. Very well, Victoria said coolly, but don't say we didn't warn you. A woman alone in this town running a man's business, it won't end well. They turned to leave just as Noah Marshall approached, leading his horse. He tipped his hat politely as they passed, but both women barely acknowledged him, whispering to each other as they hurried away. Problem? Noah asked, watching them go. Nothing I can't handle, Naomi said, though her hands were shaking with anger. You're right on time, Mr. Marshall. Noah tied his horse to the hitching post. Call me Noah, and I'm not one to be late when a lady's offering me work. Despite her agitation, Naomi found herself smiling at his easy manner. Well then, let's get you started, Noah. Tom can show you around while I tend to some paperwork. Throughout the morning, Naomi kept an eye on the new hire as he worked. Noah clearly knew his way around horses, handling even the most temperamental with a gentle, firm touch that impressed her. He worked steadily and without complaint, quickly earning Tom's approval as well. At midday, Naomi brought out sandwiches and coffee for the three of them. They sat in the shade of an old oak tree beside the stable, a brief respite from the spring heat. You handle yourself well with the animals, she commented to Noah. He shrugged. Been working with horses since I was a boy. My pa had a small ranch up in Nebraska. Nothing fancy, but enough to teach me the trade. What brings you to Great Bend? Tom asked, taking a sip of his coffee. Looking for a fresh start, Noah said simply, not elaborating. This seems like a good town. It is, Naomi said, though her earlier encounter with Victoria and Beatrice had left a bitter taste in her mouth. Though like any place, it has its share of troubles. Those ladies giving you grief? Noah asked perceptively. Naomi hesitated, not wanting to air her problems to a man she barely knew. Just the usual town gossip, Tom snorted. Begging your pardon, Miss Naomi, but it's more than that. Those women have been spreading all kinds of tales since your pa died. What kind of tales? Noah asked, his blue eyes suddenly sharp with interest. Naomi sighed. They're saying my father had gambling debts, that he was involved with criminals, that's why he was killed. She shook her head. It's absurd. My father never gambled a day in his life. People like a story, Noah observed. Especially one that explains away violence, makes them feel safer somehow. Well, their stories are hurting my business, Naomi said. I've already had 2 regular customers move their horses to the smaller stable on the edge of town. You think that's what they're after? Driving you out of business? Noah asked. Naomi considered this. I'm not sure. Mrs. Henderson, Beatrice's mother, did suggest I should sell the place, said it wasn't proper for a woman to run a livery. And who would buy it if you were forced to sell? Noah pressed. I don't know, Naomi admitted. Then a thought struck her. Although Mr. Henderson, the banker, has been trying to buy this property for years, my father always refused. He said the banker wanted to tear it down and build some fancy hotel. Tom nodded. Your pa mentioned that to me once. Said Henderson offered him twice what the place was worth, but he wouldn't sell because of the promise he made to your ma before she passed. Naomi felt a rush of emotion at the mention of her mother, who had died of fever when Naomi was just 7. What promise? To give you a home and a livelihood that couldn't be taken away, Tom said. He told me that's why he worked so hard to pay off the stable and own it outright. The pieces suddenly began to fall into place in Naomi's mind. So if people believe my father died with gambling debts, then the bank could claim the stable as payment, Noah finished for her, his expression grim. It's an old trick. Naomi stood up, anger coursing through her. I need to go to the bank and confront Mr. Henderson directly. Whoa there, Noah said, rising to his feet. If he is behind this, confronting him might just make things worse. You need evidence. I have the ledgers, Naomi insisted. They prove we don't owe anything. Ledgers can be challenged, Noah pointed out. You need more. You need to find out who killed your father and why. Naomi felt tears of frustration sting her eyes. The sheriff has no leads. Noah's expression softened. Let me help. I've got experience tracking people. Why would you help me? Naomi asked suspiciously. You just got here. You don't even know me. I don't like seeing innocent people railroaded, Noah said simply. And I especially don't like seeing a woman forced out of what's rightfully hers. There was something in his tone that suggested personal experience, but Naomi didn't press. Instead, she studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. His blue eyes met hers steadily, unflinching. All right, she said finally, but we do this my way. This is my fight. Noah nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Yes, madam. For the next few days, Noah proved himself an invaluable addition to the stable. He worked tirelessly, taking on the heaviest tasks without complaint and demonstrating an uncanny ability with even the most difficult horses. Customers who might have been skeptical about doing business with a woman found themselves reassured by Noah's presence, and Naomi's ledgers showed a modest improvement in business. But the rumors continued to spread. Naomi felt the stares when she walked down Main Street, heard the whispers that suddenly stopped when she entered the general store or the post office. Worse were the ones that didn't stop. The ones that suggested her father's associations with criminals might have extended to her as well. I heard she met with a strange man at the cemetery the very day after her father was buried, Naomi overheard Mrs. Tate telling another woman at the mercantile. Very suspicious, if you ask me. No proper mourning at all. Naomi wanted to confront them, to defend herself, but she remembered Noah's advice about not making things worse. Instead, she held her head high and continued about her business, though each new rumor cut deeper than the last. One evening, about a week after Noah's arrival, Naomi was closing up the stable when Sheriff Mills appeared. Evening, Miss Naomi, he said, removing his hat. Got a minute, of course, Sheriff, she replied, gesturing to a bench outside the office. Any news about my father's killer? Sheriff Mills sat heavily, looking uncomfortable. Not exactly. I'm here about some complaints I've received. Complaints? Naomi's heart sank. About what? About your living arrangements. The sheriff couldn't quite meet her eyes. Several ladies in town have expressed concern about you employing a single man and spending so much time alone with him. You mean Noah? Naomi asked incredulously. Sheriff, he works for me, and Tom is always here as well during the day. I understand that, Sheriff Mills said quickly. But you know how people talk, and with your father gone, there's no one to provide proper supervision. Anger flared within Naomi. I'm 22 years old, Sheriff. I don't need supervision, and I certainly don't need the town gossips dictating who I can employ. The sheriff sighed. I know it's not fair, Naomi, but a woman's reputation is a fragile thing in a town like this, and after everything that's been said about your father. My father was an honest man, Naomi snapped, and I'm an honest woman running a legitimate business. If people want to talk, let them. But don't come to me with their complaints unless they have actual evidence of wrongdoing. Sheriff Mills stood, replacing his hat. I respect your position, Miss Naomi. Just be careful. This town can turn on people quickly. After he left, Naomi remained on the bench, too angry and upset to move. That was how Noah found her when he returned from delivering a horse to a ranch outside of town. "Bad news?" he asked, noting her expression as he dismounted. "The sheriff came by," Naomi explained bitterly. "Apparently the good women of Great Bend are concerned about my virtue because I employ you." Noah's face darkened. "That's ridiculous." "It's deliberate," Naomi corrected him. "First they attack my father's reputation, now mine. They're trying to force me out, Noah, and it's working." "We lost 3 more boarding clients today." Noah sat beside her on the bench, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "We need to find out who killed your father. That's the key to all of this." "How? The sheriff has no leads." "Maybe we need to look where he hasn't," Noah suggested. "Did your father keep any personal papers? Letters, documents, anything that might give us a clue about who wanted him dead?" Naomi thought for a moment. "There's a box of papers in his bedroom. I haven't gone through it yet. It was too painful." Noah nodded understandingly. "Would you like me to come with you to look through them? Or I could stay here if you'd prefer to do it alone." Naomi considered his offer. The thought of going through her father's personal belongings was daunting, but having Noah's support made it seem less overwhelming. "I'd appreciate your help," she admitted. "But won't that just give people more to gossip about if you come to my house?" "At this point," Noah said with a wry smile, "I think that ship has sailed, but if you're worried, we could bring the box here instead." In the end, they compromised. Noah would come to the house, but they would leave the door open and work in the front parlor where anyone passing by could see them through the windows. It wouldn't stop the gossip entirely, but at least there would be no foundation for more salacious rumors. That evening, as the sun set over Great Bend, Naomi and Noah sat in her father's parlor, surrounded by papers, letters, and ledgers. They worked in comfortable silence for the most part, occasionally sharing something of interest or asking each other's opinion. "Your father was an organized man," Noah commented, looking through a ledger of horse sales. "Everything accounted for, every penny." "He believed in doing things right," Naomi said, a note of pride in her voice. "He used to say that a man's reputation was built on his attention to detail." "Smart man," Noah agreed. "Makes it all the more unlikely he'd have gambling debts." Naomi nodded, turning her attention back to a stack of letters she was sorting. Most were business correspondence, but occasionally she found personal notes from old friends or distant relatives. It was strange and poignant to see her father's life laid out in ink and paper. "Naomi," Noah said suddenly, his voice tense. "Look at this." He handed her a folded piece of paper that had been tucked into the back of a ledger. Naomi opened it and found a letter dated just 2 weeks before her father's death. "Henderson," she read aloud, "this is your final warning. Sell the property or face the consequences. We know what you're hiding." A chill ran down her spine. "This is a threat from Mr. Henderson." "Maybe," Noah said, frowning, "or it could be from someone else. We know what you're hiding suggests more than just pressure to sell." "But my father wasn't hiding anything," Naomi insisted. "He was the most straightforward man I knew." Noah looked thoughtful. "Is there anything else here? Any indication of what they might have thought he was hiding?" They searched more carefully now, looking for anything that might explain the threat. Finally, in a small locked box that Naomi had to break open because she couldn't find the key, they discovered a deed not to the livery stable, but to a piece of land outside of town. "I didn't know Papa owned land outside the stable," Naomi said, puzzled as she examined the document. "It's for 50 acres north of town, along the Arkansas River." Noah studied the deed over her shoulder. "This is dated 15 years ago, right when you said you moved here. But why would your father buy land and never mention it?" "I don't know," Naomi admitted. "But look at the price he paid. It was next to nothing. Land that cheap either has nothing on it or—" Noah trailed off, a spark of realization in his eyes, "or it has something very valuable that the seller didn't know about." Naomi's eyes widened. "You think there's something valuable on that land, but what? Could be anything: water rights, minerals, a natural pass for cattle drives. But whatever it is, I'd bet that's what Henderson and his friends are after." We need to see this land, Naomi decided. Tomorrow, first thing. Noah nodded in agreement. It could be dangerous if Henderson is willing to kill for it. If Henderson killed my father, then I'm going to prove it, Naomi said firmly. Whatever it takes. The intensity in her voice stirred something in Noah. He reached out and covered her hand with his own. You won't do it alone, I promise. The touch was brief but electric. Naomi felt a flush rise to her cheeks, and when she met Noah's eyes, she saw something there that made her heart beat faster. For a moment they remained like that, connected by more than just their shared purpose. Then Noah gently withdrew his hand and cleared his throat. It's getting late. I should head back to the boarding house. Yes, of course, Naomi said quickly, rising to her feet. Thank you for your help tonight. I'll see you at the stable tomorrow morning. Bright and early, Noah confirmed, gathering his hat. At the door he paused. Be careful, Naomi. Lock your doors tonight. After he left, Naomi stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his tall figure disappear down the darkening street. Then she carefully locked the door and leaned against it, her mind swirling with revelations about her father's secret land, the threatening letter, and the unexpected warmth of Noah Marshall's hand on hers. Tomorrow they would find answers. For tonight, she allowed herself the smallest hope that perhaps she wasn't as alone in this fight as she had thought. The following morning dawned clear and mild, a perfect spring day in Kansas. Naomi dressed in her riding clothes, a divided skirt that allowed her to ride astride comfortably while still maintaining a degree of propriety, and packed a small bag with food and water. She tucked the deed and a small pistol her father had taught her to use into her pocket before heading to the stable. Noah was already there, saddling 2 horses. He looked up as she entered, his face breaking into a smile that did curious things to her insides. Ready for an adventure, Miss Winters? He asked, tightening a girth strap. As ready as I'll ever be, she replied, approaching the chestnut mare he had prepared for her. Did you tell Tom where we're going? Just that we're checking on some property for a potential customer, Noah said. Figured the less he knows, the better, for his sake as much as ours. Naomi nodded her agreement as she checked her saddle and bridle. The deed says the land is about 10 miles north along the river. Should take us a couple of hours to get there and back. They set off just as the town was coming to life, riding north along the main road before veering toward the Arkansas River. They rode mostly in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about what they might find. About an hour into their ride, Noah finally spoke. May I ask you something personal, Naomi? She glanced at him, curious. You can ask, I may not answer, he smiled at that. Fair enough. I was wondering why you never married. A woman like you, smart, capable, beautiful, must have had offers. Naomi felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. There were a few proposals, she admitted, but none that felt right. I wasn't willing to give up my independence for a man who wanted a docile wife to cook his meals and bear his children while he made all the decisions. Noah nodded thoughtfully. So you were waiting for a partner, not a master. Exactly, Naomi said, surprised and pleased at his understanding. My father always told me not to settle. He said my mother was his equal in every way, and that's what made their marriage strong. Your father sounds like a wise man, Noah said. My pa felt the same about my ma. They worked side by side on our ranch until they both passed. I'm sorry, Naomi said softly. When did you lose them? 4 years ago. Influenza took them both within days of each other. Noah's voice was steady, but Naomi could hear the lingering grief beneath the words. Is that when you left Nebraska? Noah nodded. Sold the ranch, couldn't bear to stay there without them. Been drifting since, working where I can. And now you're here, Naomi observed. In Great Bend, Noah's blue eyes met hers. Now I'm here, he agreed, something in his voice suggesting he was exactly where he wanted to be. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities, until Noah suddenly reined in his horse, his gaze shifting to the horizon. I think we're close. According to that deed, the property should start near that bend in the river ahead. They rode the remaining distance in silence, both acutely aware of the tension that had sprung up between them, not unpleasant, but decidedly unsettling in its intensity. The land, when they reached it, appeared unremarkable at first glance. Rolling prairie stretched toward the river, dotted with wildflowers and the occasional cottonwood tree. It was beautiful in the quiet way of the plains, but Naomi could see nothing that would make it particularly valuable. "Let's ride the perimeter," Noah suggested. "Get a feel for the place." They followed the boundary markers identified in the deed, moving slowly and studying the landscape. About halfway around the property, near where a small creek fed into the river, Noah suddenly dismounted. "What is it?" Naomi asked, sliding off her mare to join him. Noah knelt by the creek, examining something in the water. "Look at this," he said, holding up a handful of wet sand. "See those black flecks?" Naomi peered at his palm. "What am I looking at, Cole?" Noah said simply. "This creek is cutting through a coal seam, and if I'm not mistaken, it's a big one." Naomi's eyes widened. "Coal, here in Kansas?" Noah nodded, looking excited. "Kansas has coal deposits all through the eastern part of the state, but finding a good seam this close to a railroad town." "That's valuable, Naomi, extremely valuable." "So that's why Henderson wants this land," Naomi breathed. "For the coal." "And why your father wouldn't sell," Noah added. "He must have known about it. But why keep it secret? Why not mine it himself?" Noah stood, brushing the sand from his hands. "Coal mining takes capital money for equipment, workers, infrastructure. Maybe he was saving up, or maybe he was protecting it." "Protecting it? From what?" "Mining changes everything," Noah explained. "It brings different kinds of people, different industries. Maybe your father loved Great Bend the way it was and didn't want to see it transformed into a mining town." Naomi considered this. It sounded like her father, practical but principled. "So Henderson and his cronies discovered the coal and tried to pressure Papa into selling. When he refused, they—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "They may have arranged to have him killed," Noah confirmed grimly, "making it look like a random robbery gone wrong, then spreading rumors to discredit him so they could claim the land through the bank." Anger surged through Naomi, hot and fierce. "We have to take this to the sheriff." "With what proof?" Noah asked gently. "We have a threatening letter that doesn't explicitly mention coal or murder. We have a deed to land with coal on it. It's circumstantial at best." "Then what do we do?" Naomi demanded, frustration evident in her voice. Noah looked thoughtful. "We need more evidence, something that directly ties Henderson or his associates to your father's murder." He paused. "Did your father have any close friends in town, someone he might have confided in?" Naomi thought for a moment. "Judge Wallace," she said finally. "They played chess every Wednesday evening. If Papa was worried about something, he might have told the judge." "Then that's our next stop," Noah decided. "But first, let's complete our circuit of the property. I want to see just how extensive this coal seam might be." They continued their exploration, finding more evidence of coal along the creek bed and in several exposed areas of earth. By the time they had ridden the entire perimeter, both were convinced the property contained a substantial coal deposit enough to make many men very rich and to transform Great Bend from a cattle and railroad town into a mining center. As they rode back toward town, Naomi's mind was a whirl of emotions, grief for her father mixed with anger at his killers and determination to see justice done. But beneath it all was a growing awareness of the man riding beside her, whose quiet strength and unwavering support had become her anchor in a storm of uncertainty. "Noah," she said as the rooftops of Great Bend came into view, "thank you for helping me. You didn't have to get involved in all this." Noah looked at her, his blue eyes serious. "Some things a man can't walk away from, Naomi. Some fights are worth fighting, even if they aren't your own to start with." "And is this one of those fights?" she asked softly, his gaze held hers. "More and more every day," he answered, his meaning clear in the warmth of his voice. They rode into town side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing, each acutely aware of the other's presence. Neither noticed the narrowed eyes watching their return from the window of the Henderson bank, or the hastily dispatched messenger who hurried toward the Henderson home after observing their arrival. Judge Wallace's home was a modest two-story structure on the east side of town, set back from the street and surrounded by a well-tended garden. The judge himself was a widower in his 60s, with a reputation for fairness and integrity that had earned him respect throughout the county. When Naomi and Noah arrived, they found him in his garden, pruning roses with careful precision. He looked up at their approach, recognition and sorrow crossing his weathered face when he saw Naomi. "Miss Winters," he said, removing his gardening gloves. "I've been meaning to stop by and offer my condolences. Your father was a good man and a dear friend." "Thank you, Judge Wallace," Naomi replied. "This is Noah Marshall. He's been helping me at the stable." The judge nodded to Noah. "Mr. Marshall, what brings you both here today?" "I suspect it's not a social call. It's about my father's death," Naomi said. "We have reason to believe it wasn't a random robbery as everyone assumed." Judge Wallace's expression grew serious. "Come inside," he said. "This isn't a conversation for the street." In the judge's study, Naomi and Noah shared what they had discovered: the threatening letter, the coal-rich land, and the rumors being spread about her father and now herself. The judge listened without interruption, his hands steepled beneath his chin. When they finished, he sighed heavily. "I feared something like this," he admitted. "Your father came to me about a month ago, very concerned. He showed me a letter similar to the one you found and told me about the coal deposit on his land." "Did he suspect Henderson specifically?" Noah asked. Judge Wallace nodded. Edward had discovered that Henderson had quietly purchased several adjacent properties through a series of shell companies. He suspected Henderson was assembling a large tract for coal mining and needed Edward's land to complete it. But why not just offer a fair price? Naomi wondered. "Papa wasn't unreasonable. Because your father opposed coal mining near Great Bend," the judge explained. "He believed it would destroy the character of the town and harm the river. He told Henderson as much when he first approached him about selling several years ago. So when fair offers didn't work, Henderson resorted to threats," Noah concluded. "And eventually murder," Naomi added, her voice hard. Judge Wallace looked troubled. "That's a serious accusation, Naomi. Henderson is a powerful man in this county." "My father is dead," Naomi said flatly. "And now they're trying to destroy my reputation to force me off my property. I need proof, Judge, proof that will stand up in court." The judge was silent for a long moment, considering. "Edward left something with me," he said finally, moving to a locked cabinet in the corner of his study. "For safekeeping," he said, "in case anything happened to him." From the cabinet, he removed a small leather portfolio, which he handed to Naomi. "He asked me to give this to you if anything suspicious occurred. I believe the time has come." With trembling hands, Naomi opened the portfolio. Inside were several documents, detailed notes on Henderson's land purchases through various aliases, copies of threatening letters, and a sworn statement from her father describing attempts to intimidate him into selling. "He was building a case," Noah said, looking over her shoulder. "Gathering evidence." "Edward was methodical," Judge Wallace agreed. "He wanted to expose Henderson's scheme legally, but he was concerned about Henderson's connections to some less savory characters. The men people are now claiming he was involved with," Naomi realized. "They're turning it all around, making him look guilty of the very thing they were doing." "A common tactic," the judge said grimly. "Accuse your opponent of your own sins." "Is this enough?" Noah asked. "Enough to take to the sheriff?" Judge Wallace considered the question. "It's a start. But we still need to connect Henderson directly to your father's murder. Without that, he could claim these documents are forgeries or that Edward was delusional." "How do we get that connection?" Naomi asked, frustration edging her voice. "We need someone on the inside," Noah said thoughtfully. "Someone who knows what Henderson is planning or has evidence of his involvement in the murder." "His assistant, Walter Preston," Judge Wallace suggested. "He's a nervous young man not cut from the same cloth as Henderson." "If Henderson arranged a murder, Preston might have knowledge of it willingly or unwillingly." "How do we approach him?" Naomi asked. "He won't just confess to being part of a murder plot." Noah looked thoughtful. "Sometimes a man with a guilty conscience just needs an opportunity to unburden himself." They left the judge's home with a plan simple but potentially effective. Noah would approach Preston at the saloon that evening, where the young man was known to have a drink after work. Meanwhile, Naomi would return to the stable and continue business as usual, giving no indication that they were closing in on her father's killer. But as they rode back toward the center of town, Noah suddenly reined in his horse. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice tense. Naomi followed his gaze and saw a plume of smoke rising from the direction of the livery stable. Without a word, they spurred their horses forward, racing through the streets of Great Bend. They arrived to find the stable engulfed in flames. A crowd had gathered, forming a bucket line from the nearby well, but it was clear their efforts were futile against the rapidly spreading fire. "Tom," Naomi cried, scanning the crowd frantically for her employee. "Where's Tom?" Sheriff Mills approached, his face grim. "He's at the doctor's, Miss Naomi. Got hit on the head when he tried to stop them." "Stop who?" Noah demanded. "3 men in masks," the sheriff said. "Rode up, knocked Tom out, and set fire to the stable. By the time anyone raised the alarm, it was too late." Naomi stared at the burning building in horror. The livery stable had been her home as much as the small house she shared with her father. Now both were lost to her. "The horses," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Were you able to save the horses?" "Some," the sheriff said, "not all." Noah dismounted and wrapped an arm around Naomi's shoulders as she swayed with shock and grief. "Who would do this?" he asked the sheriff, though he already suspected the answer. Sheriff Mills shook his head. "Can't say for sure. But it seems mighty coincidental, coming right when Miss Naomi here has been stirring up questions about her father's death." "Henderson," Naomi said, her voice hardening through her tears. "This is Henderson's doing." "That's a serious accusation," the sheriff cautioned. "Mr. Henderson is a respected businessman." "He's a murderer," Naomi said flatly, "and now an arsonist as well. He killed my father for his land, and he's trying to run me out of town because I won't sell it." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Miss Naomi, I understand you're upset, but you can't go around making accusations like that without proof." "We have proof," Noah cut in, "or we will have very soon." He turned to Naomi. "We need to move quickly now, they're getting desperate." As the stable continued to burn, reducing Naomi's livelihood to ashes, a crowd of onlookers grew. Among them, Naomi noticed Victoria and Beatrice standing with Mrs. Henderson, all 3 watching with expressions that might have been concern but looked suspiciously like satisfaction. "Look at them," Naomi said quietly to Noah. "They're practically celebrating." Noah followed her gaze. "Women like that thrive on others' misfortunes, makes them feel powerful." "They've been spreading those rumors about me," Naomi said, "saying I'm improper, that I'm involved with you in ways that aren't decent." Noah's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry my presence has made things harder for you." "Don't be," Naomi said firmly. "I don't care what they say about me, and I'm glad you're here, Noah. I couldn't face this alone." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had grown steadily since that first meeting in the cemetery. But this was neither the time nor place to explore them. "We need to find Tom," Noah said, refocusing on their immediate concerns. "See what he can tell us about the men who did this." They made their way to Dr. Simmons' office, where they found Tom sitting on an examination table, a bandage wrapped around his head and a grim expression on his face. "Miss Naomi," he said when he saw her, "I'm sorry. I tried to stop them, but they came up from behind." "It's not your fault, Tom," Naomi assured him. "I'm just glad you're alive. Did you see their faces?" Tom shook his head, wincing at the movement. "They wore bandanas. But I recognized one of them by his voice and that fancy silver belt buckle he always wears. It was Jim Redding." Naomi exchanged a look with Noah. Jim Redding was known throughout Great Bend as Henderson's hired muscle, ostensibly employed as a bank guard but rumored to handle the banker's less reputable business. "That's it," Noah said decisively. "That's the connection we need." "But it's just Tom's word against Redding's," Naomi pointed out. "Then we'll get more than words," Noah replied. "We'll get Redding to confess." The plan they formulated was dangerous, perhaps foolishly so, but with Naomi's livelihood in ashes and her father's killer still walking free, caution seemed less important than justice. Noah would confront Redding at the saloon that evening, while Sheriff Mills, finally convinced by the mounting evidence against Henderson, would be positioned to overhear any incriminating statements. "You should stay with Judge Wallace tonight," Noah told Naomi as they finalized their plans. "It's not safe for you at your house." "I'm coming with you," Naomi insisted. "This is my fight." "It's too dangerous," Noah argued. "Redding is a violent man and he won't be alone." "My father is dead, my stable is burned to the ground, and my reputation in this town is in tatters," Naomi countered, her green eyes flashing with determination. "I have nothing left to lose, Noah, and I won't hide while others fight my battles." Noah recognized the stubborn set of her jaw and knew further argument would be futile. "Fine," he conceded, "but you stay back and let me handle the talking. At the first sign of trouble, you leave. Promise me?" Naomi nodded reluctantly. "I promise." As sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, they made their final preparations. Naomi changed into a simple dress, deciding that her riding clothes would attract too much attention in the saloon. Noah checked and loaded his revolver, hoping he wouldn't need to use it but unwilling to face Redding unarmed. The Silver Dollar Saloon was crowded when they arrived, filled with cowboys, railroad workers, and local businessmen unwinding after a day's work. Heads turned as Naomi entered. A respectable woman rarely set foot in such an establishment unless she worked there. And Naomi Winters was known to be neither a saloon girl nor a woman of loose morals, despite the recent rumors. Noah placed a protective hand at the small of her back as they made their way to a corner table. "He's here," he murmured, nodding toward the bar where Jim Redding stood drinking whiskey, his distinctive silver belt buckle catching the lamplight. "So is the sheriff," Naomi observed, spotting Sheriff Mills at a table near the back, apparently engrossed in a card game but positioned with a clear view of the bar. They sat quietly for a few minutes, Noah sipping a beer while Naomi pretended interest in a glass of lemonade. Then, with a squeeze of her hand, Noah stood and approached the bar, positioning himself next to Redding. "Whiskey," he ordered, loud enough to be heard over the general din of conversation and piano music. Redding glanced at him, then did a double take, recognition flashing in his eyes. "You're the drifter working for the Winters woman," he said, his tone somewhere between accusation and amusement. "Was working for her," Noah corrected, accepting his drink from the bartender. "Hard to work at a stable that's been burned to the ground," Redding smirked. "Shame about that." "Accidents happen." "Wasn't an accident," Noah said casually. "Man who did it left plenty of evidence behind." That caught Redding's attention. His smirk faltered. "What evidence?" Noah took a deliberate sip of his whiskey. "Enough to hang a man or 3 men, maybe." Redding's hand moved slightly toward his gun, but Noah continued calmly. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. Too many witnesses." He nodded toward the sheriff's table. "Including the law." Redding's eyes narrowed. "What do you want, Drifter?" "Information," Noah said, "about who ordered the fire." "And Edward Winters' murder." A flicker of panic crossed Redding's face before he controlled it. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do," Noah pressed. "Henderson wanted Winters' land for the coal. Winters wouldn't sell, so Henderson had him killed. Then when his daughter proved just as stubborn, he had you and your friends burn her stable." "You can't prove any of that," Redding muttered, but his eyes darted nervously around the saloon. "Actually, we can," Noah said confidently. "We have the threatening letters Henderson sent Winters. We have Tom's identification of you at the stable, and we have Edward Winters' sworn statement about Henderson's attempts to intimidate him." Redding licked his lips nervously. "Henderson will deny everything. It'll be your word against his." "Maybe," Noah agreed. "Or maybe it'll be your word against his. When you're facing a murder charge, you might start thinking about saving your own neck." Fear replaced the nervousness in Redding's eyes. "I never killed anyone," he protested. "That wasn't the plan, just supposed to rough him up, scare him into selling." "But something went wrong," Noah suggested. "He fought back, maybe, and you shot him." Redding's gaze dropped to his whiskey. "It was an accident. He came at me with a pitchfork. I just meant to wound him, but—" He trailed off, realizing too late that he had said too much. "Jim Redding," Sheriff Mills' voice came from behind them. "You're under arrest for the murder of Edward Winters." Redding's hand went for his gun, but Noah was faster, grabbing his wrist and twisting it behind his back. "Don't make it worse," he advised as the sheriff approached with handcuffs. "Henderson ordered it," Redding blurted out as the sheriff secured the cuffs. "All of it, the threats, the murder, the fire. He said no one would believe the daughter over him if we discredited her, said he'd pay us well once he had the coal land." Across the saloon, Naomi sat frozen, her face pale but composed as she watched her father's murderer being taken into custody. Only the whiteness of her knuckles as she gripped her glass betrayed her emotion. Word of Redding's arrest spread through Great Bend like wildfire. By the following morning, when Sheriff Mills and a deputy rode out to the Henderson estate to arrest the banker, it seemed the entire town had gathered on Main Street to witness the spectacle. Among them were Victoria, Beatrice, and Mrs. Henderson, their faces masks of shock and dismay as they watched Henderson being led away in handcuffs. "This is an outrage," Henderson shouted as he was escorted to the jail. "I'm a respected businessman. You can't believe the word of a common criminal over mine," but the evidence was mounting. Following Redding's confession, Walter Preston had come forward, revealing that he had overheard Henderson planning Edward Winters' accident and had been pressured into silence through threats to his family. A search of Henderson's office had uncovered plans for a coal mining operation centered on the very land Naomi had inherited, along with falsified documents intended to claim ownership of the property through the bank. As Henderson disappeared into the jailhouse, Naomi found herself surrounded by townspeople, some apologetic for believing the rumors, others eager to distance themselves from Henderson's schemes, and a few genuinely remorseful for their part in spreading gossip. "I never believed those horrible things they said about you," Mrs. Tate insisted, though Naomi distinctly remembered overhearing her repeating those very rumors at the Mercantile. "Of course you knew your father was a good man," another woman added. "We all did." Naomi accepted their belated support with as much grace as she could muster, but inside she was seething. These same people had been all too willing to believe the worst of her and her father just days ago. Their sudden change of heart felt hollow and self-serving. Only when Victoria Clark approached, her usual confidence notably absent, did Naomi's composure waver. "Naomi," Victoria began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I want to apologize for Save It," Naomi interrupted coldly. "You didn't spread those rumors out of concern for me or this town. You did it because you couldn't stand seeing a woman succeed on her own." Victoria flushed. "That's not fair. I was only repeating what I'd heard." Mrs. Henderson said, "You chose to believe her," Naomi cut in. "You chose to repeat her lies, and you enjoyed watching me suffer because of them." Victoria's flush deepened, anger replacing embarrassment. "Well, your precious stable is still gone, isn't it? And your reputation spending all that time alone with that drifter, that damage is done, respectable or not." A hush fell over the gathered crowd, all eyes turning to the confrontation. "My reputation," Naomi said clearly, her voice carrying in the sudden silence, "is that of a woman who stood up for herself and her father against powerful men who thought they could bully her into submission. If that makes me less respectable in your eyes, Victoria, then I consider it a compliment." A murmur of approval ran through the crowd, and Victoria retreated, her face burning with humiliation. As she stalked away, Noah appeared at Naomi's side, a smile of admiration on his face. "Remind me never to cross you, Miss Winters," he said quietly. Naomi felt a smile tugging at her own lips. "I should hope you're smarter than that, Mr. Marshall." Their eyes met, and for a moment the crowd around them seemed to disappear. Then Sheriff Mills approached, breaking the moment. "Miss Winters, Mr. Marshall," he greeted them. "I wanted to thank you both for your help in bringing Henderson to justice. Without your persistence, we might never have uncovered the truth." "What happens now?" Naomi asked. "To Henderson and Redding, they'll stand trial," the sheriff said. "With Preston's testimony and the evidence we found, I'd say they're both bound for prison. Maybe worse in Redding's case, given it was murder." "And the land?" Noah inquired. The coal seam remains Miss Winters' property, Sheriff Mills confirmed. Though I understand several mining companies might be interested in making offers once word gets out about the coal. Naomi nodded thoughtfully. I'll consider all offers, but I'll also consider what my father wanted for Great Bend. He loved this town despite. She glanced around at the townspeople who had so quickly turned on them, its flaws. As the crowd dispersed, Judge Wallace approached, his expression solemn but his eyes kind. Your father would be proud of you, Naomi, he said. You've shown remarkable courage these past days. Thank you, Judge, Naomi replied, genuinely touched by his words. I couldn't have done it without help. She glanced at Noah, who stood respectfully nearby. The judge followed her gaze, a knowing smile touching his lips. Indeed, Mr. Marshall has proven himself a man of integrity. He paused. What will you do now, Naomi? The stable is gone, but you still have the land in your father's house. It was a question Naomi had been pondering since watching her livelihood burn to the ground. Rebuild, she said decisively. Great Bend needs a good livery stable, and I need to work. It won't be easy, the judge cautioned. Starting over never is. Nothing worthwhile ever comes easy, Naomi replied. My father taught me that. After the judge departed, Naomi and Noah walked together toward what remained of the livery stable, a blackened skeleton of charred timber and ash. They stood in silence for a moment, surveying the destruction. It can be rebuilt, Noah said finally. Better than before. Naomi looked at him curiously. Noah's face was uncharacteristically uncertain as he turned to her. If you'll have me, Naomi. Not just as an employee, but as a partner in the business and... He hesitated, then continued with determination. In life, Naomi's heart skipped a beat. Noah Marshall, are you proposing to me in front of a burned-down stable? A smile tugged at his lips. I suppose I am. Not very romantic, is it? On the contrary, Naomi said softly, taking a step closer to him. It's perfectly fitting. Our story began with destruction, my father's death, the rumors, the fire. It seems right that our future should begin here too, amid the ashes. Noah reached out, gently taking her hands in his. I know it's sudden. We've only known each other a short time, but I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you, Naomi Winters. You're the strongest, most determined woman I've ever met, and I'd be honored to build a life with you. Tears welled in Naomi's eyes, but they were tears of happiness rather than grief. I feel the same, she admitted. When you rode into town, I was lost in darkness. You brought light back into my world, Noah, and hope. Is that a yes? He asked, his blue eyes warm with emotion. It's a yes, Naomi confirmed, but on one condition. Name it. That we're true partners, she said firmly. Equal in all things, the stable, the coal land, our life together, all of it shared equally. Noah's smile broadened. I wouldn't have it any other way. He leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle, tender kiss that held the promise of many more to come. As they parted, Naomi looked around at the townspeople going about their business, some still casting curious glances their way. They'll talk, you know, she said. About how quickly we're moving, about the propriety of it all. Noah shrugged, unconcerned. Let them talk, I don't listen to gossip. Naomi laughed, a free and joyous sound she hadn't expected to make again so soon after all the tragedy. Neither do I. In the weeks that followed, Great Bend buzzed with activity and change. Henderson and Redding were held for trial, their guilt seeming more certain with each new piece of evidence uncovered. Mrs. Henderson and her daughter Beatrice left town, unable to face the shame of their husband and father's crimes. Victoria Clark remained, though she kept a low profile, no longer the social butterfly she had once been. Naomi and Noah wasted no time in beginning the rebuilding of the livery stable. With the insurance money and some of Naomi's savings, they hired workers and purchased lumber, creating a design that improved upon the original in both function and appearance. Many townspeople, eager to make amends for their part in spreading rumors about Naomi, volunteered their help, turning the rebuilding into something of a community project. As for the coal-rich land, Naomi and Noah decided to lease portions of it to a mining company rather than selling outright. The arrangement allowed them to maintain control over how the mining was conducted, ensuring minimal impact on the river and surrounding environment, while still providing a steady income that helped fund the stable's reconstruction. Their wedding took place 6 weeks after Henderson's arrest, a simple ceremony in Judge Wallace's garden with Tom and a few other close friends in attendance. Naomi wore a dress of pale blue silk, a gift from the dressmaker who had been among the first to apologize for believing the rumors. Noah, looking handsome in a new suit, couldn't take his eyes off his bride as they exchanged vows beneath an arch of roses. "I never thought I'd find happiness again after losing my parents," Noah told Naomi as they shared their first dance as husband and wife in the judge's parlor. "But then I rode into Great Bend and found you standing strong despite everything that had happened. You amazed me then, Naomi Marshall, and you amaze me now." Naomi smiled up at him, her heart full. "We found each other when we needed each other most. Some might call that fate." "I call it the luckiest day of my life," Noah replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. By the time autumn painted the Kansas prairie in shades of gold and amber, the new Marshall livery stable was completed and thriving. Larger and more modern than its predecessor, it quickly reclaimed its position as the premier stable in Great Bend, drawing customers from throughout the county. Naomi and Noah worked side by side, true partners in every sense. Their complementary skills, her head for business, and his way with horses, made them a formidable team. And in the evenings, they returned to the house Naomi had shared with her father, now transformed by Noah's carpentry skills, and Naomi's feminine touches into a warm, inviting home for them both. On a crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues, Naomi leaned against her husband's shoulder with a contented sigh. "Happy?" Noah asked, his arm tightening around her waist. "Very," she confirmed. "Though I do miss Papa." "He would have liked you?" "I think I would have liked him too," Noah said. "He raised an extraordinary daughter." Naomi smiled, her hand moving unconsciously to her abdomen. "Noah, I have something to tell you." He looked down at her, curious. "What is it, Doctor?" "Simmons confirmed it today," Naomi said, her voice soft with wonder. "We're going to have a baby in the spring." Noah's face transformed with joy. He stood, lifting Naomi to her feet and spinning her around, his laughter ringing in the evening air. "A baby, our baby, careful." Naomi laughed as he set her down. "I'm in a delicate condition, remember?" Noah immediately became solicitous, guiding her back to her chair. "You're right, I'm sorry. Are you feeling well? Do you need anything?" Naomi smiled at his concern. "I'm perfectly fine, Noah. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. And I'm strong, remember? The strongest woman I know," he agreed, kneeling beside her chair and placing a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "And our child will be strong too, with you as their mother." As twilight deepened into night and the first stars appeared in the Kansas sky, Naomi reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect happiness. The path had been painful, marked by loss, betrayal, and struggle, but it had led her to Noah, to love, and now to the promise of new life. Her father's murderer would face justice, her reputation had been restored, and the future stretched before her, bright with possibility. "What are you thinking about?" Noah asked, noting her thoughtful expression. "About how life can change so quickly," Naomi replied. "A few months ago I thought I'd lost everything. Now I have more than I ever dreamed possible." Noah smiled, taking her hand in his. "And this is just the beginning, Naomi, just the beginning." As they sat together under the vast Kansas sky, hands intertwined and hearts full, Naomi knew he was right. This was just the beginning of their story, a story that had started in tragedy but would continue in joy, built on a foundation of mutual respect, equal partnership, and a love that had proven stronger than the destructive power of gossip and greed. And in the years that followed, as their family grew and their businesses prospered, the people of Great Bend would often point to Naomi and Noah Marshall as an example of what was possible when a man and woman stood together as true partners, supporting each other through life's challenges and triumphs. Their love story became something of a legend in the small Kansas town, the tale of a woman whose reputation was destroyed by jealous tongues, and the cowboy who said, simply and profoundly, "I don't listen to gossip." Their first child, a son they named Edward after Naomi's father, arrived in the spring of 1877, a healthy, robust boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. He was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Grace, whose laughter filled their home with joy. By the time their third child, Thomas, was born in 1881, the Marshall family had become fixtures in Great Bend, respected not just for their successful businesses, but for their generosity and commitment to the community. The coal mining operation on their land was conducted responsibly, bringing prosperity to the region without destroying its natural beauty. Naomi, drawing on her father's vision, insisted on replanting areas after extraction and protecting the river from contamination, practices that were revolutionary for the time but would eventually become standard in the industry. The livery stable expanded as Great Bend grew, eventually including a successful horse breeding program that Noah oversaw with pride. Their reputation for fair dealing and quality stock spread throughout Kansas and beyond, bringing customers from as far away as St. Louis and Denver. Through it all, Naomi and Noah remained true to the promises they had made to each other on that day amid the ashes of the old stable. They were partners in every sense, sharing responsibilities, respecting each other's strengths, and supporting each other through difficulties. Their marriage became a model that challenged the conventional wisdom of the time, demonstrating that a union built on equality could be stronger and more fulfilling than one based on traditional roles. And though the gossips of Great Bend occasionally found new targets for their whispers, they never again directed their venom at Naomi Marshall. Perhaps they had learned their lesson about the damage false rumors could cause, or perhaps they simply recognized that their words had no power over a woman who knew her own worth and was secure in the love of a man who valued her strength rather than fearing it. As for Victoria Clark and the other women who had sought to destroy Naomi's reputation, they found themselves increasingly marginalized in Great Bend society. Victoria eventually married a cattle baron from Texas and left town, her departure marked by few regrets on either side. Mrs. Henderson never returned to Great Bend after her husband was sent to prison, choosing instead to live with relatives in St. Louis. Beatrice married a shopkeeper in Topeka and occasionally visited Great Bend, though she avoided the Marshalls when she did. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Noah surprised Naomi with a gift, a silver locket containing miniature portraits of their 3 children. Inside the lid, he had engraved a simple message, "To NM, for turning gossip into gold, with all my love, NM." "It's perfect," Naomi said, tears of happiness in her eyes as she fastened the locket around her neck. "Though I hope you know I already had all the gold I could ever want right here." She gestured to their home, where their children could be heard playing in the next room, and to Noah himself. "I do know that," Noah assured her, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "But sometimes it's nice to have a reminder of how far we've come." And they had come far indeed, from the darkest days of loss and slander to the bright, full life they now shared. Their journey had not been without challenges, but each obstacle overcome had only strengthened their bond and deepened their appreciation for the love they had found in each other. As the sun set on that anniversary evening, painting the Kansas sky in the same vibrant colors that had illuminated their first days together, Naomi and Noah stood on their porch, arms around each other, watching their children play in the yard. "Do you ever wonder," Naomi asked softly, "what would have happened if you hadn't ridden into Great Bend that day, if we hadn't met at my father's grave?" Noah considered the question, his arm tightening around her waist. "I think we would have found each other somehow," he said finally. "Some things are meant to be, Naomi, even amid so much that wasn't meant to be," she pressed. "My father's murder, the rumors, the fire, even then," Noah confirmed. "Sometimes the worst circumstances lead us to the best outcomes, though we can't see it at the time." He turned to face her, his blue eyes as warm and sincere as they had been on the day he'd proposed. "I'm not glad for what you suffered, Naomi, but I'm grateful every day that it brought me to you." Naomi smiled, reaching up to touch his face, still handsome though now bearing the subtle marks of a decade of Kansas weather and the responsibilities of fatherhood and business ownership. "As am I," she said simply. And as their children called for them to come and see a nest of baby rabbits they had discovered beneath the hedgerow, Naomi and Noah Marshall walked hand in hand across the yard, their steps perfectly matched, their hearts beating as one. Behind them, the town of Great Bend stretched toward the horizon, a place transformed by their love and determination from a site of tragedy to a home filled with joy and possibility. Their story, which had begun with whispers of scandal and the echo of a gunshot, continued in the laughter of children and the quiet moments of companionship that marked their days. And though the gossips of Great Bend had long since moved on to other targets, the legacy of Naomi and Noah Marshall of love that defied convention and thrived despite adversity would be remembered and retold for generations to come. In the end, it was not the rumors that defined Naomi Winters Marshall, but the strength with which she had faced them. And it was not conventional wisdom, but Noah Marshall's refusal to listen to gossip that had allowed their love to take root and flourish, growing stronger with each passing year until it became as much a part of Great Bend's landscape as the river that flowed beside it and the endless Kansas sky that stretched above.